On Christmas Day, 1776, Washington crossed the Delaware. On Christmas Day, 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. But on a little-known Christmas Eve in 1831, a fire ignited in the mountains of Jamaica that truly burned open the curtain of a new world. It forced the British Empire to sign the most expensive check in history. 30 years later, it strangled the throat of the Confederate South from across the ocean. It was a turning point in human history that transformed slavery from an economic necessity into a criminal act. It all began on Christmas Eve, 1831. The rumor intended only to pray for peace. In this episode, we will witness how a peaceful holiday celebration spiraled into a storm, ultimately toppling the dominoes of the old world in the most ironic way possible. December 1831. The air in Jamaica was electric. Among the 300,000 enslaved people, a rumor spread like wildfire: free paper. People believed the King of England had already signed the Emancipation Order as a Christmas gift to his subjects, but the wicked local white planters were hiding this freedom. Samuel Sharpe entered the stage. He was a black deacon and a brilliant orator. Taking advantage of permission granted to slaves to hold religious gatherings during Christmas, he planned the first modern general strike. The plan was simple: utilize the tradition that the days following Christmas were rest days and simply sit down. Refuse to cut the cane unless wages were paid. It was a perfect plan of nonviolent non-cooperation, designed to use the unique atmosphere of Christmas to peacefully force the planters to compromise. But revolutions rarely go according to plan, especially on a powder keg. The planters smelled rebellion and mobilized the militia. The taut string in the air was ready to snap. On the night of December 27th, at the Kensington estate atop the mountains, the moment of destiny arrived. Radical rebels had no patience to wait for the sit-in. An enslaved man rushed into the trash house, a warehouse piled high with highly flammable dry sugarcane waste. He struck a match. This was meant to be a defensive warning signal, but it instantly turned into a towering beacon. Because Kensington Estate was situated so high, the fire tore through the night sky, visible to enslaved people for miles around. A misunderstanding occurred. People thought total war had begun. Within hours, Samuel Sharpe's vision of a peaceful strike vanished. Estates on the surrounding hills lit their fires in response. Cane fields burned. Great houses were surrounded. The storm, later known as the Christmas Rebellion, descended irreversibly amidst misjudgment and rage. The scale of this rebellion was staggering. Over 60,000 enslaved people mobilized, controlling vast areas of western Jamaica. The British response was swift and merciless. Regular troops arrived with artillery to support the militia. Rebels armed with machetes were no match. The fighting lasted only 10 days, but the retribution lasted for weeks. Over 300 rebels were publicly hanged. Their heads were placed on poles on the plantation grounds as a warning. Before his execution, Samuel Sharpe left behind a deafening testament: "I would rather die on yonder gallows than live in slavery." But this was not just a slogan, it was a prophecy. The planters thought they had won, but this Christmas fire burned through the British bottom line. Not just a moral one, but the economic one. MPs in London did the math. The military cost of maintaining slavery was too high. If they didn't abolish it, every Christmas could turn into a pile of ashes. In 1833, Parliament passed the Slavery Abolition Act. To appease the anger of the planters, the British government borrowed a staggering sum: £20 million. This was equivalent to 40% of the British government's annual budget at the time. This money had an unintended side effect. Planters, flush with massive compensation, returned to Britain and invested the funds in railways, mines, and insurance. It is the ultimate irony. Capital originally used to exploit slaves was forced by this rebellion to be injected into the British homeland, accelerating the explosion of the Industrial Revolution. Britain's pivot triggered a terrifying domino effect across the Atlantic. The first domino fell in Brazil. In 1835, inspired by the Jamaican Christmas Rebellion and British abolition, the male revolt broke out. Though failed, it plunged slave owners across South America into a deep fear of British conspiracies. The second domino fell in the United States. Southern planters found themselves isolated. To resist this wave of abolition, they became more radical, accelerating the annexation of Texas and intensifying the North-South conflict. When the American Civil War broke out in 1861, the Confederacy's biggest miscalculation was counting on British intervention. But Britain did not intervene, because the fire lit by Samuel Sharpe had irreversibly reshaped the values of the British public. A nation that had just spent a fortune to abolish slavery could never support a regime fighting to preserve it. The Christmas fire of Jamaica ultimately strangled the Confederate South on the diplomatic battlefield. The light from the fire at Kensington Estate that night permanently reshaped the economic and moral map of the Western world. Though Samuel Sharpe fell, the match he chose to strike on that Christmas Eve ultimately burned to the darkest institution in human history and lit the path to freedom. It forces us to ask, if the fire at Kensington had not been lit that night, if the British Empire had continued to maintain that brutal system, what would our modern civilization and even our definition of freedom look like today?